All right. Hello. Oh, my friend Ingrid is here. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mathew Heggem. I am one of the co-founders of the Accounting Alchemy Network. And I am really excited today to be flying a little bit solo. We have Ingrid in listening. Ingrid is my colleague and community member in building this lovely community of grassroots. It's a grassroots movement empowering accountants to transform the world. And so for those of you who are new to the Accounting Alchemy Network, just so you understand a little bit about sort of what we do and why we do it, we have Lyceums. Those are educational opportunities to plug into the dialogue that's occurring around what it means to be a regenerative accountant. We have, last month we did this really amazing, had this really amazing conversation on gender reconciliation and what it meant to address that inside of the container of the accounting industry. And so anyways, we have an amazing website. We recently updated it. Go ahead and check it out. It has all the information you need to know about who we are, what we do, why we do it. I'm not going to get into the details because today I really want to focus on the intention of our Spotlight Lyceum. So Spotlight Lyceum is a little different than a regular Lyceum in that what we are actually doing is putting the spotlight on somebody or someone or something in our community that's happening that is an expression of the work that we're actually talking about. And so the term that we like to use in this space is this term called regenerative accounting professional. And what that means to me, and I think what it means to other people, is that it's sorry, I saw a chat. I'm going to ignore, for those of you chatting with me, I'm going to ignore you right now because I got to stay focused, but I'll look at the chat in just a moment. I get super distracted by chat. So what was I saying? Oh, so regenerative accounting is really about helping people to understand how to prioritize people and planet over profit, right? And so what does that actually look like and mean when it comes down to or into the office, right? Where we're actually talking about financial transactions and working through our QuickBooks files and thinking about spreadsheets and literally dialoguing around this sort of numbers thing. And so today's spotlight is on the Rhapsody Project. The Rhapsody Project is an organization who I've been working with for the last, I feel like it's been almost 2 years now, Joe, that I've been working with y'all. And we started off initially on a topic around earned income strategy and helping the organization to make money, shifted into some work around strategic planning and really setting up the organization for success as it stepped into the future. But then we tipped into the conversations around money, finances, improving the financial systems, dealing with the QuickBooks file, budget versus actual reports, finance committees, et cetera, all the stuff that quote nonprofit accountant would find themselves tending to as they embark on this journey. But we did some things a little bit differently. And so we're going to get into that today. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the Rhapsody Project to basically place this organization on this regenerative accountant's path or journey. Where we have several team members from the organization here who will talk about their work in the organization, their relationship to money, and their experience going through the process. But we also have a special guest, Candis Fox, who is a money coach and a good friend of mine, somebody that we brought into the process to leverage one of their tests to help evaluate and discuss basically money archetypes and how we end up showing up in conversation around money. So we're going to do a round of introductions, and then after we do, I'll kick us off with a question, and we'll let this dialogue unfold. For those of you who are in the space, welcome. Feel free to put a comment in the chat. When I'm not speaking, I will look at the chat and see what you have to say. And if you feel comfortable, this space is open for you to come off camera, or rather on camera, I guess, technically, and actually ask your question of the people that are here. So with that, I'm going to pass the ball to do introductions, and I'm going to start off maybe with you, Candis. Let's start with you. Who are you? And then we'll bring it into the Rhapsody Project, okay?
All right, sounds good. Yeah, my name is Candis Fox. I'm a wealth and integrity coach and consultant, and I help people deepen their relational intelligence specifically around money, which is what I was brought into with the Rhapsody Project for a little while ago, where we focused on the subconscious patterns of how we make decisions with money, which are typically emotional decisions. And I'm actually very curious to know how things have gone since then. So I'm happy to be here and excited to see how it goes. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Candis. And so now let's bring it to the Rhapsody Project. Joe, would you mind coming off the mic, introducing yourself, and maybe saying a few words about what the Rhapsody Project is?
No problem. Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Seamons. I'm in Seattle, where the Rhapsody Project was founded and is still mainly based. We have a chapter in Richmond, Virginia as well. And our organization builds community and celebrates heritage through music. So we center young people in our programs, but we have programs for all ages. We have a space at King Street Station where we have pay what you will programs for community members. Again, pretty youth centric. And we have programs in about 10 schools across the greater Seattle area, as well as some community centers. And, you know, we're not only teaching people to play music, we're teaching them to explore their heritage. So the foundational kind of curriculum that we have that informs all of our programs is called Layers of Heritage, where we invite people in this series of reflection exercises and conversations with their family and community, you know, thinking about where they're rooted and how to root more deeply and where they come from. And that serves our goals of creating an equitable community where everybody sees each other more clearly. And it also creates a foundation for racial and cultural equity that allows us to learn about, approach, study other cultures, arts and cultures with an equitable grounding, because we're always staying conscious of our own positionality. So that's kind of philosophically what we do. The way we do that on the surface is we teach people to play music, especially stringed instruments. And so I'm the co-founder, and I do some teaching in the classroom, and I do a lot of the grant writing and kind of, I would think of myself as operations, and I'll pass it to one of our program directors, Jed Crisologo.
Hello, friends. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Jed, and I am a working musician in Seattle, and also the youth programs director at the Rhapsody Project. So what I do is a lot of the coordination of our in-school and in-hour space programming that centers young folks, along with being one of the primary teachers with Joe and Briar, and part of that three-person leadership team. We have a small team of just over a dozen folks, with and growing rapidly these days. So it's a really exciting time to be on this team. And yeah, I'll pass it over to Brian.
Hi, thank you. My name's Briar. I am the HR department, as well as a person on the structural leadership team and an in-school instructor for like K through 5. Anything older than that, and well, it just turns sort of punitive. So what I do is just the people side of things, making sure everybody's okay, but also making sure that we are also checking in like with each other and not just with ourselves. So that is that's kind of what I do. Short and sweet.
Oh, thank you all. And so now you've met the team behind the magic, or some of the team behind the magic that is the Rhapsody Project, and heard a little bit about Candis, and so now I want to kind of just give a brief overview of the journey that we've been on, so that for those of you listening, you can kind of understand the context of what we embarked on, and then what I want to bring us to is to that point where we decided to bring Candis into the conversation, and I want to bring us to that point, because I think if you've listened to what certainly what the Rhapsody Project team members have spoken about, particularly around what their programming is about, I think this piece around equity is critical, right? And part of what and this goes back to, well, what does a regenerative accountant do? Why do we do the work that how do we do the work that we do? And I think part of the work that we need to do is really understanding that conversations around money have been people have been left out of those conversations, and there's been a lot of trauma and harm caused to people or onto people through money dynamics inside of capitalism, but it also makes it hard for people to even enter into those conversations and have effective dialogue. And certainly when we talk about organizations and we get into the topic of compensation and how compensation works and how financial decision making works, it's not just a matter of letting one person who is the CFO decide, but that there's a more equitable way of approaching this decision making and this management accounting work that actually is going on here. So just to give you the context, again, I started working through my company, 10K Creators, an organization whose mission is to help artists and arts organizations improve their financial wellness. I started working with Joe through a partner of ours, King's Dream. King's Dream is a consulting organization out here in the Seattle area, and they hired me to help the Rhapsody Project improve how they make and manage money, as is the mission of 10K Creators. And initially we started on a conversation around earned income strategy and looked at ways that the organization could improve how it was making money. That turned into some work around the end of year fundraising, but that also turned into some work around strategic planning and thinking about the bigger picture. We ended up doing basically some planning for 2024. And then that turned into a dialogue around, okay, well, what does the cash flow look like? And then from that point forward, Joe and I spent a good amount of time really trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we start to manage the cash flow of this organization? We built a good old spreadsheet. We love a spreadsheet. Figured out what that spreadsheet needed to be, came up with a system for maintaining that. And then that turned into a conversation around, okay, now that we know what's going on with the cash flow and we're setting some financial or strategic financial goals for ourselves, how do we then begin to manage against that and bring other people into the dialogue so that the decision making is decentralized and equitable, and that we're actually setting goals that have clear measurable outcomes that we're measuring against to see if we're achieving our goals. And so then that brought in a whole conversation around budget versus actuals. We then ended up looking at the QuickBooks file, decided that we needed to renegotiate how we were using the QuickBooks file, migrated thanks to QuickBooks Made Easy to an upgraded version of QuickBooks Online, engaged them to help us do the migration, then did a whole thing around the chart of accounts. We hired a new accountant to help us support the journey, somebody that was a little bit more savvy with QuickBooks Online, that could kind of be a little bit more involved in sort of the oversight process. And now we're in the midst of implementing that budget versus actual inside of QuickBooks. But we also, I think it was about 3 to 5, maybe 6 months, I can't remember when exactly, maybe it was only 3 months ago, brought Candis in to really open up this dialogue around these money archetypes and sort of the other side of the money conversation. So maybe what would be useful, Candis, is if we could hear a little bit from you about, okay, well, what was that thing that we did 3 to 6 months ago? Can you sort of highlight what that was? And then I think that would be a really good sort of entry point for our colleagues from the Rhapsody Project to kind of start reflecting on some of the conversations that brought up for them and how that changed or shifted their perspective around money and finance. So over to you, Candis.
All right, yeah. So a few months ago, we sat down. I had him take a 2-minute quiz, and that spat out different archetypes for people. I then put them in a spreadsheet and took a look at what kind of energy was going on. So what you've been so great at, Mathew, was like what to do with money, how to do money things. And so my focus was bringing in how to be, like, who are we being with money? How do we show up with money? And how do we want to show up? Because oftentimes we find ourselves thinking that we're showing up one way when we're not. And so the purpose of that quiz was to find the difference, right? And oftentimes too, I've noticed when we're thinking we're showing up one way with money and actually showing up a different way, we often get stuck in terms of creativity on how to generate money or attract money. We get kind of stuck on certain ideas and patterns of like, oh, this is the only way I know how to make money. So I came in to kind of shake things up a little bit and see if we could maybe like bring in some more flow, right? both in terms of actual money and how the organization was structured, and like really find who had the perspectives that would bring the Rhapsody Project to where it wanted to be. So we took the quiz, we went through some of the archetypes. There's 10 of them. I noticed that I was just looking at it this morning. The pattern was generally pretty passive. So I take a look at the top 4 archetypes, and the top 4 for most people, like the top 1 for each person involved, were all passive archetypes. So there weren't a whole lot of people who were really engaged with money. We had a lot of people who were absolutely saying no to it. They were just like, nope, 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 not thinking about it, don't want to talk about it. We're not doing the money thing. I just want to hang out with kids, or I just want to play music, or I just want to organize people, like, you know, and quite a few dreamers and people who understood the web of who needed money, but that doesn't get us money, right? So I saw a great strength in people in the Rhapsody Project understanding what to do with it when they had it. And my goodness, y'all had some great ideas on where to put it, but we really had to focus on how to bring it in. And so the second session, we did some role playing and just tried on different archetypes and just kind of played with them. And I was like, what do you think the like least healthy or most unsustainable version of this archetype would do? Because sometimes that gets us unstuck, right? We don't necessarily have to do that thing, but maybe we can find an ethical way to to get to that path, right? So yeah, what was the like unhealthiest way to do that? What was the most sustainable way to be in that archetype? And it was fun to see everybody just kind of just get a little silly and play with things. And I saw people, I remember Jed specifically, you had some really beautiful insights. I believe your top archetype at the time was the exiled, which again goes back to what Mathew was saying around some people just are kept out of the conversation. And that's the whole point of the exiled as an archetype, is they've been left out. They've been intentionally pushed away and hurt by money. And I remember, sorry for calling you out, Jed, but that was one of the bigger ones that you brought in. And what you did with it was amazing, because as soon as you stepped into a role of saying like, oh, hey, what would it be like to actually engage with it? What would it look like? I mean, you really took a leadership position in coming up with really creative strategies and ways forward financially that I think everybody was like, oh, yeah, that feels really good, right? Because you brought in that kind of sensitivity that I really appreciated. So those are some things that I remember.
Got it. Okay. So now let's turn it over to Joe, Jed, and Briar. And I'd love to hear, and maybe we'll start with, well, Jed, if you want to go, since you were mentioned by name, it'd be interesting to hear what your responses are to some of this stuff. And then let's hear from the Rhapsody team. Like, what has this journey been like for you in terms of, I think, developing new practices around managing the money, having these conversations as a group or as groups around the money, and thinking more specifically about some of this archetypal work and how that's informed or influenced your presence in these money conversations. And who would like to go first? Jed, you could if you wanted, but you don't.
I can go first. That's fine. I think at the very least, understanding where we stood with money was super helpful. Our entire mission statement is centered around people that are disenfranchised by capitalism. Not to put too fine a point on it, we work with Black and Brown youth in the inner city. Historically, I grew up a very punk rock kid. I don't trust money. But when I get it, I know exactly where to put it. Like, I love spending money on our programming. Like, that is the part of money that drives me, is the programming side. It at the very least, it's kind of put us in places where we understand what our natural like proclivities make us the best and worst suited for. Like, I'll never be as good at fundraising as Joe, because I hate asking people for money. Like, it's just not something I'm ever gonna be good at. And it was really liberating to understand that like, that's just inherent in me. And Joe's really good at it. And doesn't have those problems that I have. And he's great at going and fundraising. I'm and, and it gave me space to understand like, oh, okay, my job is to make sure we're efficient with money because I don't always trust that we're just gonna get it in. Um, so so I think that gave me a lot of clarity in where I'm most useful for the work when it comes to money.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, thanks, Jed. Yeah, I mean, for me, there was a number of reasons that I was excited when Mathew brought up the possibility of working with Candis. One is that as a fundraiser who's done this work for other organizations as well, like I'm conscious of how much everybody has their own set of unique, deep emotional things around money, patterns that are learned and are part of upbringing and lived experience, and all those things combine uniquely in every person. So to me, I believe that transparency is part of equity. So that transparency, I want to happen not just at the board level of our organization. I know I'm really striving for a system and to arrive somewhere with our bookkeeping systems and everything, so that at every level, even if you're just an intern with our organization, if you want to see the books, I want to be able to show them to you, explain them to you, and have them be clear, up to the point of, with the exception of like, we also have to have dialogue as a staff about like, okay, well, I'm cool with us all being transparent about what we're getting paid by the organization. Is everybody cool with that? Because that to me is not a radical level. That's just a reasonable level of transparency. Like, this is what I get paid to do what I do. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so there's more to discuss around all those kind of things. But that's why I was initially excited to work with Candis, is to just like surface some of those emotional issues and people's issues, because also, the dynamics of it are like, as Jed said, like we're serving Black and brown folks. Most of our staff is made up of Black and brown folks. They are the most heavily impacted systemically by the many messed up ways that our society, projects issues of money onto human beings. And so I try to take on more of that because I'm coming up privileged in every category, straight white man of generational wealth. I have more emotional capacity, I feel like, to deal with the stress that money can imbue in an organization than others do, because I'm not living as close to, I'm not as at risk. I have the golden parachute to fall back on. So, but at the same time, like that can make me overreach, right? And be like, let me just take this on. But then that doesn't lead to transparency, because I'm like, oh no, I'm handling that, so y'all don't have to worry about it. But then that's also making me know a bunch of stuff that everybody else doesn't know, which is not transparent. So I'm trying to like deal with those. Those are the tensions that I already was somewhat conscious of, and Candis's process with us helped me become more conscious of. And so then the issue that comes up, like Jed naming that, like, he's not comfortable asking people for money, like I've reconciled myself, like that's most of the people in our organization, but that means that I have to go find other people that share my level of confidence and ease with it. But then I also don't want to acculturate that that's just how we are in our organization, because money is simply energy, right? It's just energy, and we create all these weird psychoses around it. But when you're asking somebody for money, you're just like, hey, can you pour more energy into our organization? Because, and that's another way that we look at money, right? Is like, you can give your time, and that to us is often more valuable than your money. We would prefer you to give both, of course, but we need both. So to me, it's also like we're at the beginning of that journey of trying to get reacculturated, to which the transparency piece lends itself, right? Like, hey, here's it broken down. Here's what every program is costing, and being transparent with my program leads that are not bringing in the money to sustain their program. Like, hey, we've got to go find this funding, because I want your program to grow. I don't want to have to cut it because we've been running it and can't find a way to sustain it. So like all of those issues come up for me as we talk about the stuff, because again, like more of that right now rests on my plate, because we're a grant dependent organization, which means that our incoming funding is always doing this, like that's not a sustainable thing, and it's a stressful thing. So those are some of the dynamics that like clarified or emerged for me as we worked with Candis. And, it's not, like the process continues, right? To make our accounting practices and our cultural practices really be transparent and making people feel empowered to talk about, bring up issues of money, and just like not treat it like this boogeyman that we don't talk about it, because that's what our archetypes happen to be. Like, we don't have to be that way, Yeah. So there's probably more than you're asking for, but there's some of my thoughts. I'll pass it to Briar.
Briar, over to you.
Very simply, I grew up totally different than Joe, actually opposite of. And so I think I got the devotee, which like was so fucking annoying because of like what that word means in my head. But then also like that totally makes sense because I always have enough money to do what I need to do, pay my bills, get groceries, be self-sufficient. Like, and maybe I save a little bit and like, get myself something that I think is, extravagant, but still like within a budget that I've set. And then not really talking to other people about it, and like not really allowing people to like offer me things. Like very specifically, there was a time when I was gonna go, I had an opportunity to do a thing, and I wasn't gonna do it because I didn't have the money. And the only way I was able to is because the people that kept offering, that I kept refusing help from, just paid for it anyway and just didn't listen to me. And then I was able to do that thing and meet Joe and become a part of the Rhapsody Project and be doing this work right now. But that is, very cut and dry. I didn't really think I had much issues with money because I have no problem spending money. I had no problem figuring out like maybe like what we would do with money, like for myself or like for the organization. But then the other side of it too, with the like, I'm not good at asking for it either. So, but for very different reasons than than Jed, I think, and some of the other people in our organization, like we have different reasons for why that position is hard to be in. But for me, I'm just a self-sufficient person, and that's all I have. That's all I have like brain space for. So simply, that's me. Oh, and also my name is
You're
wrong.
currently
Sorry.
named as Joe, which we know you're not Joe. You are Briar. And so thank you, Briar. I want to come back to you, and then open up the dialogue to the rest of the space, or the rest of the community members in the space as well. And that is this, right? So right, we're talking to accountants, right? And accountants are typically, my experience of accountants is that they are not by default engaged in conversations around culture, psychology, emotional intelligence, and these other aspects of money, right? They come in, they do the bookkeeping, they reconcile, they like make sure the tax forms get filled out, they make sure that the compliance paperwork is all sorted up, and whatever reports whoever needs is accurate and formatted, and then that's kind of where the line stops. And they might give some strategic financial advice and be like, oh, you should cut this or cut that, or think about spending this differently. But that other aspect of the conversation around well, what's actually going on emotionally or psychologically or culturally with the money isn't a regular hasn't, in my experience in the accounting industry, has not been a regular conversation that accountants are having with their clients. And yet, in my opinion, my informed opinion, I think it's a huge miss, because what we realized in bringing Candis's evaluation tool and Candis's presence in the conversation was that these archetypes, right, have sort of a way of functioning or operating that could either help to accelerate the conversation or help to decelerate the conversation and actually take us away from maybe the goals or the aims that we had. And I think what was particularly interesting, Briar, in our conversations around preparing the team to participate in these conversations was that, you're sitting in the HR chair, right? And the HR chair is, has, again, I'm not an HR person, like I'm not an HR expert, put it like that. But bottom line, there's compliance stuff that you got to tend to. There's an awareness around sort of mitigating risk, right? Which accountants are aware of, a mitigating risk, and thinking about, okay, well, what happens if we start talking about who's making what inside of the organization. How do we create a safe space so that people can show up in those conversations and be empowered, and also not inadvertently create an inequitable situation or circumstance, because now we're talking about a level of transparency that people from a corporate perspective haven't maybe been used to. And so Briar, I'm curious, like, for you as the HR person, sort of sitting in this dynamic of having to tend to the needs of the people of the organization, how has this conversation around the archetypes or the transparency around the money sort of impacted, influenced, or shifted your thinking about just about your role in the organization?
I wouldn't say that it has, because I still just we're already on this like transparency, like, front, like here's what we're gonna do. Like, we're just gonna be really open about like the spreadsheets and like what we're spending on what and whose budget goes to what. But I think maybe the one thing that it changed is like when I'm in sort of one-on-one HR check-ins, how does this make you feel? It's just it was just an easy transition, or just like an easy add-on to, all of the other reasons, all of the other things that I ask people. Hey, how does this make you feel? Like, what does this bring up for you? Is this very important? Was this conversation helpful? And I can like kind of do that anywhere, because money, like talking about money, doesn't necessarily make me uncomfortable. It's just kind of the exchange piece when it comes to myself. So, and ultimately trying not to be dismissive. Maybe that's another place too where it helps, because it's so easy for me to be dismissive of something like money in a larger conversation. You just tell people what's there, and then we just move on. And in my mind, I'm like, no one wants to sit here and look at that fucking spreadsheet. No one is like going through every line item, and like they want to know how money's affecting them. And so I just try to there are some people, I know there's a Jed, he likes spreadsheets. But yeah, like speaking from like, if I think about myself and I'm like, I don't like a spreadsheet. I bet there are lots of people in our org that like see this. And like, I also have the ADHD and dyslexia. So they see the spreadsheet and they're like, what? Like, just tell me how it's affecting me and we'll move on. So I think it's helped me be a little less dismissive, like to feel like, okay, well, actually people do like spreadsheets and people do want to know the nitty gritty of what's going on. And that showed up a little bit like with these different like archetypes and thinking about how people relate to money on a personal, but then also as it pertains to our business. And I think that would be how it changed me. Just added question in my one-on-ones, and then also try not to be as dismissive when it comes to like fully explaining what's going on.
Yeah.
In order to get everybody on the same page.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. And I'll also name, I think that your organization was prepared to do this kind of work from the beginning, right? You talk about racial equity, you talk about creating a better world, right? You're not afraid of transparency. You want transparency as an organization. You want equity as an organization. And I think what it just to go back to the container of who this audience is right. Some of for you accountants out there, some of your clients might not be as ready as the Rhapsody Project is or was, and so part of what you need to be considering is what does it look like what is actually happening inside of the culture of the organization that would either help or not help this conversation to move forward. And PS, for those of you, just as a reminder, PSA, right? We at the AAN have a lot of resources to help you. I know Ingrid and Jana are working on the JEDI program, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Training. We've got the great program with the Pachamama Alliance, the Game Changer course to get you and or your team members educated on some of the issues that might help to shift the culture, to create the space to have these kinds of conversations on an organizational level. But Jed, I want to follow up with you. I mean, Briar, this is like the call Jed out day, right? So Briar mentioned you, so I want to hear from you. Like what, and I guess I'm kind of curious, Jed, because what happened in the narrative of our experience together is my conversations initially were all with Joe, right? And then once we introduced the strategic planning process and thinking more about the bigger picture and the vision of the organization, and then we brought you into really thinking about the finances, you ended up starting to participate on some of the bookkeeping, doing some of the bookkeeping, but you also took charge on really figuring out some of the program expenses and trying to hold the space to a certain degree with Joe. So what has been your experience as of late, sort of navigating the finances of the organization? And I guess I'm particularly interested in sort of how, like, and any learning or growth that you've experienced over the last few months as a result of taking on more of that responsibility within the container that we've fashioned here.
Yeah, thanks. I actually don't mind at all being called out. So
Okay.
that's in my personality type. Um, I guess the hidden backstory on me is I am the one person in our org thus far who sold out for a little bit and worked a corporate job for a decade. And I learned a lot in that time that I was so ready to not do anything with. I was like, don't ever wanna. I work for a nonprofit for a reason, and this was the only day job that could get me back. I was playing music full time, and it's like I don't want to make other people money. But all of this stuff has been parts of jobs I've done in the past. Like I've run teams, budgeted teams, I've hired, I've been on HR teams, I've been on data teams, and this has just been, I guess, an invitation to step forward into those roles to where they can be really useful. I guess part of it was giving myself permission to do these things, and that if I'm doing them for reasons that I love, I'm not. I have a lot of issues with capitalism, and this lets me get around those issues because we're not trying to make any money. But my big thing is like I love efficiency. I'm always looking for how do we get more efficient. So when Briar's like, I don't want to look through every line, it's like, I want to look through every single line because I know we're not as efficient as we can be. Where can we cut funding? Where can we add funding? Because my whole thing is I want to give this programming to every kid in our area for whom it's appropriate. And the only way we do that is by, yes, increasing our funding, but B, I think there's always ways to do more with what we have. And part of it is understanding every cent that gets spent and collected. And the other part of it is like, how do we get better at those things? So I guess this journey has just really given me clarity of purpose in terms of like what my intentions are here and where I can best serve. And it is, starting to look, I swore I'd never look at another spreadsheet, but I really enjoy them, and I think it can be a place where I can be more impactful than if I were to, stay passive there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, it did.
That was my answer.
It did, and I'll also point out something else that I think is important for accountants to hear in particular, right? Accounting is a specialization; it's a skill set, right? And I think what's happened culturally in the world that accountants have created, particularly as you quote scale up that hierarchy ladder, right? Because they're traditional accounts, there's a little bit of a hierarchy going on here, and there's a little bit of a focus on the CPA as sort of the lord of all knowing, right? It's like, oh, just ask your CPA, or if your CPA says it's okay, then you're fine, right? Like there's sort of this inherent, and rightfully so to a certain degree, right? I've known many CPAs who've become incredible trusted advisors to their clients, right? And have supported their clients through some pretty important business, personal and business transformations. And so that's not to discredit those that are in that position and do that work. But that there's been this dynamic for a long time, I think, of the accountant sitting on the other side of the table and holding all of the ownership and the knowledge, and seeing the client on the other side and saying, oh, you don't know this, I know this, here's what we're gonna do, right? And the relationship that we're aiming for here at the Rhapsody Project is there is no one person who is the sort of overlord of the accounting system here, in part because what we've done is we've distributed the work through a group of people, but then we've also looked at ways to make sure that even though maybe Briar doesn't prefer a spreadsheet, right, she's still at least comfortable entering into the conversation when the spreadsheet is the thing on the table, right? But also looking at the places where it's like, you know, Jed loves a spreadsheet. So great, how do we distribute the areas of competency and the areas of empowerment within the organization so that we're all playing an effective role and have a certain level of comprehension and awareness around the language of accounting and finance so that we can all actually participate effectively as a group, right, in this dialogue. It's in short, not like, okay, well, let's go ask the CPA that question because we quote, don't know what we're doing. And I say this because I think, you know, I think there's a lot of maybe misconceptions or preconceptions about what our clients can or cannot handle. And the truth is if you look at this group of folks here, right, these are, you know, and I'm an artist myself, right? And I know many people have classified me as an artist and say, oh, well, artists don't know how to do business. They don't know how to do finances. They don't know how to do numbers. And actually what's being demonstrated through the competency and skill sets and contributions of this group to our conversation around money is we're actually proving that, no, it's not that people can't do it. It's just that there's been walls put up that have prevented people from accessing and participating effectively in these conversations, because we're all brilliant people. We're all capable of being financially empowered and being able to participate in these conversations around financial wellness that are above and beyond whether or not you know how to do a journal entry to you know, expense inventory or whatever the more technical thing is, right? So Joe, what are some of your reflections on some of the things that have been said so far, and then we'll come back to you, Candis, after we speak to Joe.
I mean, I resonate with a lot of what's shared. I think, you know, I kind of just, I have to balance being like in creative mode versus critical mode, right? Like I'm better at naming the aspirations or I feel like defining or articulating like what the vision is for what I would like the systems to be. I don't feel skilled, equipped, or like the right choice for the person to act like on the accounts level, on the financial level. Like I'm not the person you want implementing that vision, because I'm not the right kind of detailed oriented person who gets their juice from that. Like give me the big picture and then let me go out and tell the people about the big picture and draw more people in to support the vision. That's where my strengths are, right? So like, you know, to me, it's just, you know, it goes to like everybody getting super clear. And this is something we're still really working on with Rhapsody of like, are we sure that we're all in our sweet spot? Like I think of the thing that you gave us, Matthew, that like areas of genius, areas of competency, areas of frustration. I still feel like in reflecting on the conversations that we had, like I still feel like we have too many people, like at least with a toe or two in their areas of frustration. And you know, I'm desperate to get us all into areas of genius. And so, you know, that goes to the financial, it goes to other parts of of our business that we're running together. And figuring out like, you know, we're basically trying to do a cooperative thing within a nonprofit legal structure where everybody kind of works on the things they're passionate about. And so when I think about the, you know, Candis name, like what we've got is a bunch of people who are, if are not outright avoidant about money, they prefer to think about it as little as possible. and that does not lead to, I mean, that hinders transparency, not even because the thing can't be seen, is because even if it's visible. You just don't look at it. You know, it's like it's right there on the wall, but most of us are saying, well, let me just look at it just when I absolutely need to. Otherwise, cool, it's numbers on the wall, I'm good with it. You know, so like that's the thing where my critical brain, I go to like, well, what do we build into our system to where we're creating a comfort level with, okay, there's the thing on the wall, we're all going to look at it and talk about it for 10 minutes, you know, okay, cool, we'll talk about it again next month or whatever, you know, like what does that look like, so that people are getting out of that, you know, tunnel vision around it, so that the transparency actually leads to the level of freedom and autonomy that I want for us when it comes to issues of money. I don't want you to have to ask me. I trust you. Go do the thing. You know, we've got the money system figured out. If you need to check on it, but go do what you need to do, and whatever it costs, pay for it. You know, that's the dream. So I'm sorry if that's, I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's where my mind goes.
No, I think it's very helpful. Candis, what are some of the reflections that you're having as you're hearing the Rhapsody Project talk about their money stuff?
So many wonderful things. First of all, I just want to recognize like how powerful just a few hours of this kind of intentionality can be in terms of like finding where your comfort zone is with money. And there are ways, I don't think we've gotten to this yet, but there are ways to alchemize and kind of like expand our comfort with certain financial aspects, including like receiving money or compliments or support, just for example. But that system and that practice is a little in itself uncomfortable. And so there are ways to kind of play with it. But to bring it back to another point, speaking specifically to the accountants who are watching and participating in this, one word I think that everybody in this space is referring to that isn't used very often is called synergy. And it's an organizational structure where our strengths are leading. So we have different strengths, and everybody is doing the things that they love and are energized by their work because they're doing the things that they love and that they're comfortable with and strong in. And so those areas of genius are shining, right? And so what's great about when you start working with Synergy as a structure is now you get to see where those frustration points are and how to expand them, right? Which again, something that we can play with if we want to, and it is uncomfortable. Another thing I wanted to bring up was specifically for accountants, your relationship to money matters a lot. Because I know, Matthew, you've done a little bit of work just kind of understanding your relationship to money and how you show up in businesses. And I know that, you know, sometimes people become accountants because they want to save failing organizations. Sometimes they go in because they want to be that authority figure and tell people what to do because they have these skills, you know? So getting clear on, you know, why you went into accounting, what kind of responsibilities you really want to have in your work, because sometimes, of course, when you're put in that CFO position, you don't actually want all of that responsibility, or you might find that it's overwhelming or get stuck feeling like you're alone in it. Where when we take a look at our relationship to money and the kind of archetypes and stories at play, we might find that that's not actually the best use of our own skills and practices, right? Because like our emotional self shows up in a different way. So for instance, Matthew, if I can kind of like speak to something that I experienced with you specifically, each person of the 10 archetypes has at least one that they really cringe about. They're just like, ugh, hate it. Don't want anything to do with it. That, Joe, is the one that we play with to expand our capacity for being more comfortable with things that typically make us uncomfortable. And I remember, Matthew, yours was the Dominator, which, let's be honest, that whole archetype, I created it based on everything I hate about capitalism. So on its most unsustainable end is everything that we're used to, right? And there is a healthy, sustainable way to envelop that energy and be more protective, be more consensual. And so, Matthew, something that I saw you do, even just in that one session, like you're so good at leading, taking control, guiding situations. Like you've been doing that. This whole facilitation has been beautiful. And it's coming from a place of like more consensual space, right? Like the way that you've approached accounting in general, just even with this group in particular, is all about like, hey, how do we build in consent practices? How do we build in that transparency? How do we systemically support this value that I have? So I see actually a really healthy, sustainable dominator in you, which is lovely, right? Like they all have these beautiful gifts and things. And so my question out there is like, why are you doing this? What do you emotionally get from the work that you do? And does that actually serve you? Or does it just make you get a rush and then you're like looking for that rush again? You know, like we do so much for these emotional reasons, and you might have the logical skills to make logical decisions about money, which I think is every accountant's strength, right? But like, who are you behind it? You know?
Yes, fantastic question, says Alina. All right, so we are coming up on the final moments of our conversation today. Thank you, Candis, for that. And I guess I want to kind of flip it a little bit. And so Joe, Jed, Briar, Candis, the people watching this, as you know, are accountants, and hopefully they're out there serving organizations who want to be on this sort of regenerative accounting journey, and reminding us that not all of them are maybe in the same place that your organization is around racial equity and doing social justice work. What are some of the sort of recommendations? And I guess let's speak to well, we're speaking to accounts, but we can also speak to the organizations, right? Who are represented by CFOs in this community. Like, what are some of the recommendations that you have on getting on this journey of creating greater equity and transparency around finances? And maybe it's a wish list too. I mean, I know our organization at the Rhapsody Project, we're still working on it, right? We've only just finished getting that budget into the QuickBooks file. We got to clean up a bunch of data, right? So there's some very practical things that we're moving through on this journey. But for organizations who want to go down the same path, what recommendations do you have for them? And we'll start with whomever would like to come off mute first.
I'll go. My finger's right here anyway. Well, you're women, but talk to the Black women first. Like, talk to them first. They're always going to be sitting there thinking, this person thinks I'm less important if they're not the person that you're like, hey, Briar, why don't you go first? So simple. It doesn't really even matter what the question is. It just matters to be acknowledged. And you might already know that, but coming from the place that I'm coming from, the way that I look and the way that I was raised and the way that means I think about money, especially, like, I want to be acknowledged first, even if I don't have anything to say too. Like sometimes my answer is like, you know what, ask somebody else. Even being able to say that first is so awesome. And I don't know if I have anything really beyond that.
Thank you. That's
so, let somebody else go.
Thank you, Briar. Okay, who's next?
I guess I'll go. I think what's important for the orgs and for any financial professionals working with them is to not forget that the mission statement is the guiding principle of all of our decisions. It should be the North Star on every type of decision we make. That becomes like more obscure and harder to do when it comes to money and the nitty-gritty of things, which makes it probably even more important. So for orgs, I would say that don't lose sight that should be your guiding light. And for any accountants or other financial professionals that are working with these types of organizations, I think it's especially incumbent on you to understand what's important to the orgs you're working for. Like more so than probably for-profit places. Like, understand your orgs, understand what's important, and then understand the groups of people that they are and they serve, because those conversations you have will probably look different depending on who's going to be filling out these Zoom rectangles in your monitor.
Thank you. Joe?
I just want to make sure I understand the prompt. You know, what of the many things I could share, what kind of would you like to hear, Matthew?
Imagine you're in front of a room of 1,000 accountants who want to practice a more equitable relationship to financial conversations. What would you implore upon them to then go out and do with their clients? It's a reframe of the.
Yeah, thank you. Encourage your clients, if they're not going to tap a resource like Candis, to find a similar resource. Encourage your clients to acknowledge that they have been harmed by the systems we live in, and that finding a way to understand how they're being affected is going to make them handle money more responsibly. You know, it's just like our society has many problems. One of them is definitely our mentality around money, and without acknowledging that there are like emotional components that make us behave irrationally, you're going to just keep putting band-aids on something that's a much deeper wound. So yeah, that would be that's what I would like to, whatever organization I'm representing, that's what I would like the accountant to be reminding us of. Like, hey, you know, you're doing this, like, you can give me the nitty-gritty of like, I'm not getting you these invoices on time or whatever, but really there's a deeper reason that dysfunction is happening, and it probably has nothing to do with my administrative capacity. It has a lot more to do with my emotional issues around money. So that's what I would say.
I think I'd like to add really quick the idea of step up and step back. If you're somebody who has a lot to say, or if there are people in your group that you're talking to, they got a lot to say, like at the beginning of your meeting, be like, hey, let's try this step up, step back idea. If you're somebody who talks a lot, maybe let somebody who doesn't talk a lot go first. You know, like, exercise your right to be quiet if that's what you need. If you're somebody who struggles with speaking up, then exercise that muscle. Speak up. And saying that like at the beginning of a meeting is like so helpful to make sure that everybody is getting heard.
Word. Thank you. Yeah, and it goes back to this idea that, you know, what it means to be an accountant doing this kind of work is not what I think it used to mean to be an accountant doing the traditional kind of work. And to your point, Briar, like, an accountant's ability to create the space for like, yes, they might be the expert. Yes, they might know all the facts and the figures and the compliance requirements, but in order to create the space for the dialogue that needs to happen, accountants need to, you know, be quiet and listen. It's sort of part, and create the culture for that, and to foster that, and then that doesn't happen overnight, right? That there's like trust that needs to be nurtured and cultivated, and earned, in fact, in some regards, to be able to be in this kind of a conversation with people. So, all right, so we are at time. I want to say thank you to my guests today, Candis, Joe, Jed, and Briar. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you to our attendees who were able to attend live, and who are here in the space. We appreciate you. We are going to be taking this recording and putting it up onto our YouTube channel at the Accounting Alchemy Network, and then sharing it in our newsletter. Inside of the description of the follow-up for the YouTube, I'll also make sure to include information about the Rhapsody Project and Candis, so that you can follow up with them individually if you have any questions or want to just get to know those organizations better. I encourage you to do so. These are amazing people doing amazing work in the world. And more people need to know about them, in my humble opinion. And with that, everyone, thank you so much for your time today. Have a beautiful afternoon, and I appreciate you. All right. Bye.